How vulnerable are we to cyber threats?
Big time.
If the grid goes down, we'll eventually just kill ourselves out of desperation. There will be no food, there'll be no water, no medical, no communication.
It's probably the most vulnerable thing we have. We don't really have a focus here. Tier 1, diversity, equity, and inclusion for every agency and department. White rage. The people doing the work can't collect the intel that you need to secure this nation because they're not allowed to look there. And we haven't even talked about DPRK or Venezuela. That guy has been having a party this entire time.
How vulnerable is our power grid?
It's probably the most vulnerable thing we have. And people just don't pay attention to it because, I don't know if because it's not sexy or cool to talk about or cool to work on, but our power grids are like 60, 70 years old.
It's going to be cool when the lights don't go out.
And people, exactly. And people are like, no, that just happens in that movie Die Hard or something, Die Hard 4, whatever it was. I'm like, no, I mean, it's not that hard to shut off a power grid through a cyber attack. And once you get it down, to get it back online, I mean, just think of it. I don't want to get into the numbers. There's not a lot of these things that control the electricity supply to the country. And for people who don't know what a power grid is, it's literally just like a switch that says, you got electricity over here, we're going to take it in and give it to you over there, right? And it's just a relay system. And we haven't upgraded those in forever. And I'm not talking just physical infrastructure. I'm talking how do we protect it from cyber attacks from the CCP, from Russia and Iran and other bad actors. And we don't really have a focus here because that's an intel directive. And to pull back on it, the NIPIF, the National Intelligence Priorities Framework, is a president's rack and stack of what they want the intel community to focus on. Tier 1, 2, 3, 4. For us in the Trump administration, it was terrorism, hostages, the never-ending wars, Iran, the CCP, Russia, boom, Tier 1. And the DNI with the president changes that based on what he wants. And then the intel community says, okay, CIA, you got, and I'm making up numbers, you got 5,000 people on this. This is your Tier 1 for 5,000 people. Go. Same thing, NSA, DOD, FBI, given their specific lines of effort. The NIPIF now, it reads like a children's playbook. Tier 1, DEI, Tier 1, diversity, equity, and inclusion for every agency and department. Tier 1, LGBTQ stuff. Tier 1, white rage. And the people doing the work can't collect the intel that you need to secure this nation against things like electric grids because they're not allowed to look there.
How vulnerable is it to outside attacks?
Big. It's big because once they hit it, we can't fix it fast. Look, we just saw Paris during the Olympics just got blacked out. Ain't a coincidence after the opening ceremonies. And I think President Trump has talked about this. You need to overhaul the infrastructure around these systems to safeguard us from what I view as one of the easier threats our adversaries can deploy against America. And it's also, those are harder to trace too. So that's the other thing. The sourcing would be much harder on that than, say, a kinetic operation like a 9/11 style attack.
I mean, is there any contingency plans up at the top on if that were to happen?
So there's this thing called COOP-COG capabilities, like continuity of government, and everybody's heard about locations around America. I can't really talk about, but there's a continuity plan for government to keep going and for enough personnel to be around to make sure we can do all those things and supposedly defend the nation and have the commander-in-chief and his cabinet secure and do all that. But there's no contingency plan to say if you wipe out the electricity west of the Mississippi, how are we going to turn it on? It doesn't exist.
I mean, that's great that government's still going to function, but...
Yeah.
But I guess what I'm getting at is if the grid goes down, we'll eventually just kill ourselves out of desperation. There will be no food, there'll be no water, there'll be no medical, there'll be no communication, there'll be no nothing.
I guess it'll be like one of those end of the world shows,
I mean, did they talk about this up there? At that level? Do they even understand what will happen if the grid goes down for
I know we did. when we were in. I know we did. And again, this is a type of lift that you're not fixing overnight. You got to get Congress's buy-in to budget this, to allow the agencies and departments to go in and make this a priority, to allow companies come in and rebuild the infrastructure and fix it. Same with our nuclear programs and our nuclear arsenal. It's the same deal.
So we're fucked.
I think we have an ability. That's why I think this election is so important, not just for everything we've talked about to this point, but in terms of national security and defense, which is sort of my wheelhouse. We have an opportunity to come in and reprioritize all the things that you and I have just been talking about so that the American people are safeguarded, because they've been neglected for too long, because these are not been priorities of the current administration and some of the previous administrations.
How likely is that method of attack, do you think, from Russia, Iran, Korea, China?
Something's going to happen, if not already. Here's the other thing. The intel community right now is playing catch up on half these attacks because, again, it wasn't a priority to preemptively detect them and thwart the attack. And so not only playing catch up, not only is it a deprioritization of intelligence collection and enforcement, you also don't have a will in D.C. to fix and upgrade any of this stuff. So I've always said they're going to come at us in some fashion during this election cycle. I don't know exactly what that's going to look like or if we're going to know right away.
What do you think about what I was telling you this morning about the pristine opportunity to hit us? When I was talking about, I wasn't saying it's not a prediction, it's what I would do. And it seems to me we would be, let's say Trump gets in, day one of his presidency would be the weakest possible point that they could hit us.
Yeah.
Correct? Because from that point forward,
yeah,
the way I think, the country will begin to strengthen. So it would be at the weakest point on day one of his presidency. And so if I was them, I would wait until he is elected and hit on day one. Whereas if they don't hit and Kamala or whoever they decide to stick in there, who knows, right? Then we'll see 4 more years of weakening, which will enhance the probability of them coming out on top.
Look, I think that analysis is pretty spot on in terms of timeliness for our adversaries to decide on when's the most opportune time for them to strike. I think there's one other factor that we talked about at breakfast that may alter that a little bit, which is there's so much bad stuff going on right now that our adversaries have collectively kicked off against us, whether it's the border, whether it's the never-ending war in Ukraine, whether it's the war in Israel, whether it's the CCP and what they're doing or going to do in Taiwan, whatever's going on in Africa, whether it's Afghanistan and its resurgence of Al-Qaeda. There's so many things going on that I think an adversary that traditionally might have waited to that opportune day might come in the interim and say, these guys have no idea how to defend what we can put out there right now. So maybe they go now. Maybe they go in the interim in the next 100 and whatever it is, 4 days or something like that. But they've already done 3 things that nobody said would ever happen. Started 2 new world wars in Ukraine and Israel, and allowed China and the CCP to flex their muscles on Taiwan. Everybody's like, that's never going to happen. Well, it didn't happen under Trump. It all happened now. And we haven't even talked about DPRK, their new program, their rockets. That guy has been having a party this entire time. Or Venezuela, right?
Audio Jungle.
people forget about how bad some of these regimes are for global stability when they're not in the news every day. And I think that's advantageous for their leadership, and they see it. And they're like, all right, well, let's figure this out. Because at the end of the day, all they care about is themselves.
How vulnerable are we to cyber threats?
Big time.
What are the other vulnerabilities?
From our adversaries specifically?
Yes.
We talked about everything coming in from the border, huge collective threat that's just going to keep growing and metastasizing. And that includes a lot more of the physical stuff, right? The crime, the fentanyl, the narco trafficking, the sex smuggling, that kind of stuff. The cyber stuff is in a different lane, but could expose us just as much, if not worse. And I think we're very, very, very vulnerable to that. Just look at what CrowdStrike did, shut down. That's an American company run by James Comey's buddy.
Is it really?
Yeah. James Comey's former number 2 is Shawn Henry, the COO, or whatever it is. And if this company can get as big as it did, mind you, this is the same company, CrowdStrike, that the FBI, when Donald Trump was getting to the presidency and James Comey was the director, remember the whole DNC hack from Russia, another disinformation campaign? They said the Russians hacked the DNC to try to rig the election for Donald Trump. Comey gave the servers from the DNC to CrowdStrike to exploit. Have you ever heard of a time that the FBI surrendered its investigation to a private entity and didn't conduct its own surveillance and exploitation of that data? I interrogated Shawn Henry and 65 other people under oath during Russiagate, and we were unable to declassify his testimony for years. So the narrative of the DNC was attacked by Russia was out there. What did Shawn Henry say? Now it's declassified? We didn't find any evidence to support that.
Wow.
So and you got to stitch these things together. So when you're talking about vulnerabilities at the cyber level, who knows what other traditional areas of expertise that the government has that they've outsourced, right? What do they give Facebook? What do they give Google? What do they give Twitter? I mean, we haven't even talked about censorship, and we know that is just a dominant plague in modern day media.
Yeah.
And we're paying them to do it.
Yeah.
So you got to go out there and find, hopefully if Trump wins, this is another thing. Find all these contracts that we've given to all these companies and pull them. Why are you making money off of your corrupt activities because your friends from government then went to work at Twitter and then you got in bed with them and said, oh, we're going to have an election integrity task force?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Kash, this interview could go on for hours, but we got about 5 minutes before you got to catch your flight. So I just want to ask you, you're close to Trump, and if he does get in there and win the presidency, what do you think we can expect improvement-wise in the next 4 years?
I think my opinion is you almost don't need to hear from me. I don't know another candidate that's put his agenda out there more in detailed, delineated fashion than Trump. His Agenda 47, his RNC platform, it's there in black and white. And it's in super detail about what he's going to prioritize. National security, defense, law enforcement, intelligence, the border, the never-ending wars, American hostages, economy, infrastructure, cyber, and electric. I mean, it's all out there. So I think, people always talk about what's he going to do on day one. Obviously illegal immigrants and all that. Hopefully he does it all right away, because I think that's the urgency that we need it. It'll take time to implement, but hopefully he comes in and says, okay, here's my agenda. And I think that's what most presidents do. They're like, here's my agenda, go. You go do what you do at Ag. You go do what you do at DOD. You go do what you do at FBI. We're going to do what we do at the White House. And everybody's going 24/7. I think it'd be a pretty quick fix for a lot of it. Some of it's going to take time. But I do think he'll end the forever wars super fast. I do think he'll shut down the border super fast. I do think he'll expel immigrants super fast. And I do think that will give the economy a big boost as a collateral result.
No matter where you're watching Shawn Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts.